Yeah, it's on 22.
Hello, good afternoon.
Who do I have? Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, I can hear you, Brendan. This is a Jay from Fletcher's project, CBD
Hi.
office.
Hello, how are you?
Good, good.
Hey, Ben. Yeah, good. Just about to All right, everybody, we might make a start. I know you're all on muted mic, but hope you're all well and having a good day after a nice weekend. Very wet in Ashburton. I assume the rest of Melbourne is as well. One of the documents I gave out, which wasn't required reading, but was fixed versus growth, the two basic mindsets that shape our lives. And I was wondering if anyone in the group at this point has had a chance to have a read of that. If you have, say, turn your mic off and let me know. Just interested in anyone's view who's read that. It's sort of a new thinking about trying to make sure that you've got the right messages to your head.
I think I read some of it and then got distracted. But yes, I read the first bit and it was very interesting, and I will go back to it again.
Yeah, it's an interesting document just about the need to want to grow and the need to have the right messages in your head that you're willing to grow, to take on new things. Otherwise, we tend to sort of hear them, but they don't really penetrate. And anyway, if you get a chance, I would have a read of that. It's quite a good summary of the psychology around growing and learning and that. So I would encourage that. All right. Today we're going to really look at Colin Powell and his leadership thinking, and depending on the time frame, then move on to Covey and get started. And Covey goes over several weeks of time. I'm going to start with a video of Colin Powell addressing about leadership to Colgate University. I assume everyone can see that, and if you can't hear it, somebody chirp up and let me know.
I want to congratulate Colgate for the job they are doing in educating young Americans for positions of leadership. And I'm especially pleased to have an evening with not only students but members of the community who come together to be part of this university family. People will still say to me, we're glad you're occupied, and you're also up at your center at the City College of New York, the Powell Center, my alma mater. But it can't be the same as being the Secretary of State. It just can't be the same. You got to miss it. And my response is, I don't miss anything in life. I like to go through life looking through the front windshield, never through the rearview mirror or the side mirrors. There's nothing I can do about what is behind me. I want to see things new and different and interesting, whether it's information technology or youth programs. But I always want to be looking out the front windshield of life, never behind me. For my young friends and students here, remember, as you get involved in student organizations, and when you leave here, you will become responsible for people, your followers, your subordinates. Remember that they get the work done. And the role of a leader is to put people, human beings, in the best possible environment to achieve the purpose of the organization you're a part of. How do you go about doing that? At Fort Benning and throughout my career, they focused on just a couple of very simple things. One, have a clear sense of purpose, have goals, have a mission. Goals and mission are pretty good words. You see them all the time. You see them in PowerPoint presentations. But the word I prefer is have a purpose. The organization has to have a purpose. That's a more driven word. So when you take over an organization, whether it's an office of 3 or an army of 3 million, make sure you convey throughout the organization a sense of purpose. What are we here for? What do we do not just to make money? What do we do to make this a better society? And the best leaders I've known are those who can convey this sense of purpose down to every single person in an organization. The second thing they taught us was take care of the troops. Take care of the followers. They will get the job done for you. Train them, give them the skills they need. Make sure they're ready for the task ahead. give them the equipment they need, whether they're weapons, computers, knowledge, whatever they need to get the job done. If you're a real leader, you'll make sure they have what they need, and you will never look away from those needs. You will not only talk the talk, you'll walk the walk with them. Make sure that you also commend them when they have done good things. And it's not just a matter of promotions or salaries. Sometimes it's nothing more than, I'm so proud you're a part of my team. But if you want to be a leader, you've also got to be ready to discipline people and fire people when they're not getting the job done. Don't work around them. Don't give the work to somebody else. The good followers know who the bad followers are, and they're waiting for you to do something about it. So my young friends, make sure you develop the fortitude to be realistic and not turn away from problems, but to deal with problems when they come along. And if it means hurting someone's feelings for the good of the organization, you have to train yourself to be able to do that. But it's all about human connections, all about conveying to the followers that you believe in them, you're going to support them, and we are all in this together.
All right. I always think it's good to see these people that we're learning about and understand, you know, some little bit about them. And many of you would know Colin Powell. He was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He was Secretary of State. He was the lead general for the U.S. Army. He had quite a career. His leadership primer is essentially 19 lessons on, or maybe even 20 on leadership. And these aren't necessarily the same as Covey that you go, look, I completely relate to that. And, you know, and like, I like pissing people off, you know, the first one. But there's some that are going to resonate more with you than others. And that's really what we want to do. So what I'd like to have done is perhaps somebody from the group who felt like number one was something that they could really identify with, to read that for us and talk about why. And then anyone else who's got a number one as well can chirp in. So if anyone felt number one was something for them, turn your mic on and maybe read this for us.
I did pick that one, Bradley. I thought someone else may have. I thought I'd give them a moment.
I was jumping in, so you beat me. That's good.
Oh, damn. I've never been good at this, even in school, but I'm happy to read it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, being responsible sometimes means pissing people off. Good leadership involves responsibility to the welfare of the group, which means that some people will get angry at your actions and decisions. It's inevitable if you're honourable. Trying to get everyone to like you is a sign of mediocrity. You'll avoid the tough decisions, you'll avoid confronting the people who need to be confronted, and you'll avoid offering differential rewards based on differential performance, because some people might get upset. Ironically, by procrastinating on the difficult choices, by trying not to get anyone mad, and by treating everyone equally nicely regardless of their contributions, you'll simply ensure that the people you'll wind up angering are the most creative and productive people in the organisation.
Nice reading. Why did that resonate with you?
I made some notes on this one. And I think that one hit me because, not necessarily because I relate to it at this moment. I acknowledge that I'm not that kind of leader, but I would like to be. I think it's because, you know, maybe not by nature, but it is ingrained in me in a way to be a people pleaser a bit, and I do tend to avoid conflict. It's always made me really uncomfortable. So I am finding that I'm having to relearn my approach, I suppose, both in business dealings and in general, in order to benefit myself and the business and, you know, my relationships in and out of work in the long run, to be able to lead in that kind of way. So I think that's why it hit me, because it kind of made me realize that not trying to please everyone simply means that I am being responsible rather than letting people down. And in fact, probably the opposite of that is true. I think perhaps having been a people pleaser, that's more likely to let people and companies and whatever else down versus doing what needs to be done sometimes.
Fair enough. Good points. Ian? Weren't
For
you?
myself, it was more, if you're doing something wrong or could be better, you're not going to grow. You're not going to grow the team by putting a stop to it. I think that was my sort of takeout. Or in sort of like a real estate perspective, if you've got information that's really important to it that a vendor wants to hear that they don't necessarily want to hear, I think you're going to hold them back by not doing the right thing.
Sorry, I had an accident. Keep going.
Yeah, so to me, that was more about you can't get better if you're sort of blindfolded to what's there because it's easy. Sometimes you know that things can be done better or someone's doing the wrong thing, but instead of pissing them off, you just roll with it. It's you'll never grow that way.
Yeah, and that's it about, being honorable, not pissing people off not being honorable and not pissing people off doesn't really get you anywhere. Sometimes it's in the laundry. Sorry, I just knocked over a glass of ice water. My Beatles book fell on my glass. Bad luck. Anyone else choose number one? There's an interesting part at the very end about that if you don't do this, you end up pissing off the people or angering the people who are the most creative and productive, because you find that people want you to make the hard decisions. They want things to be done. They don't appreciate when things are left, and particularly when like there's a recalcitrant person or someone causing problems and they're not dealt with. People really don't like that. And there was a study done many years ago in white collar workers in the United States, and the number one thing that they disliked about management was their lack of dealing with difficult employees. They want you to deal with the hard decisions. They want things to be done. So sometimes, they say you can't please all the people all the time. So it makes a bit of sense. How about number two? Did anyone choose number two as their sort of point? Or happy to read it? Well, I pick up my ice. No. Anyone pick number two? No? How about anyone prepared to just have a read of it for me?
G'day, Bradley. I actually had number two of one of the ones I chose.
Yeah, cool. Go ahead, man.
No problem. So the day soldiers stop bringing you their problems is the day that you have stopped leading them. They have either lost confidence that you can help them or concluded that you do not care. Either case is a failure of leadership. If this were a litmus test, the majority of CEOs would fail. One, they build so many barriers to upward communication that the very idea of someone lower in the hierarchy looking up to the leader for help is ludicrous. Two, the corporate culture they foster often defines asking for help as a weakness or failure. So people cover up their gaps and the organisation suffers accordingly. Real leaders make themselves accessible and available. They show concern for the efforts and challenges faced by underlings, even as they demand high standards. Accordingly, they are more likely to create an environment where problem analysis replaces blame.
Why did that resonate with you, Ed?
I think primarily and a lot of them that did resonate were along similar theme. In looking at a previous workplace, worked initially, started my career at KPMG, and then moved to, I guess, the more small environment and boutique environment that is Lighthouse. And I guess, I think, looking back at my time on KPMG, it's quite a hierarchical, I guess, organization, which is, I think, probably common across all the chartered firms, to be fair. And, as an analyst, as a very junior person, your primary communication is with middle management, with, little to no contact with partners or those senior people in the business. And I think at times, if maybe disagree or don't necessarily align with what your middle manager says. That's kind of where it ends. And I feel like, you know, in a junior staff member, when that niggles away at you and you've got no way of, I guess, escalating it, that can be quite frustrating. Whereas compared to Lighthouse, I mean, I sit next to Mitch, my boss, and I am probably the most junior member of the investment team, but still have a lot of contact with him. And I think, you know, looking down some of the other lessons, like lesson 5 about leaders being across the detail, I guess that contrast reflect in that lesson as well. So yeah, I guess I just found it particularly relevant to the 2 different workplaces I've been at so far.
Cool. Anyone else want to comment about lesson 2?
Yeah, Bradley, it's Mike. I sort of agree with this. I've seen it in a couple of workplaces where I think it's more ego of the person in charge not being approachable, not being able to take on feedback, but then also just having that sort of ego, not being approachable, gave people under them a sense that they couldn't actually approach them or couldn't take any, you know, positive or negative ideas to them. So I think that really can harm the culture. And I think that's one thing, as a compliment, I think that's one thing that Fletchers do really well. So, but I have seen that be quite detrimental, particularly in a medium-sized business before.
Yeah, you know, it's a funny thing when we're going to promote people to, say, partner or director. We talk to them, and I have for years got them in my office and talked about how they could be exactly the same as they were yesterday, today, but people will perceive them different because they're now in a leadership role. And I don't think it all falls on the leader necessarily, that they have to be the one that are open and everything. It's also the troops as well, because people will look at you differently just because you're in that sort of role. And that in itself makes you in that different role have to think, I've got to be deliberately more open. I've got to deliberately be more deliberate about what I say and how I go about saying things, because otherwise I could, you know, alienate people. That's why I'm at work, for the most part, I'm not sarcastic, because people don't take it right. And whereas in home life, I'm probably a lot more humorous and sarcastic, believe it or not, Sarah. But because people don't, you know, so leaders have to be open, they have to be level, they have to be cognizant of how people below them would feel. They have to try to put themselves in other people's shoes. But it's really important. If you're not open, one of the things I always say is that when somebody walks in and resigns and they didn't say, look, I've had an offer from somewhere else, I'm really thinking about what I should do, it is attractive. If they just walk in and resign, then they didn't have number 2 going. They didn't have someone they felt they could really talk to. They didn't feel like there was someone that they wanted to talk to. They just walk in and resign. So I think that's a good sort of tell about how you're going as well. We need to keep moving. What about number 3? Anyone choose number 3 and want to read it or talk about it? Anyone? All right, well, I'll have a read. Don't be buffaloed by experts and elites. Experts often possess more data than judgment. Elites can become so inbred that they produce hemophiliacs who bleed to death as soon as they are nicked by the real world. Small companies and startups don't have time for analytical, detached experts. They don't have the money to subsidize lofty elites either. The president answers the phone and drives the truck when necessary. Everyone on the payroll visibly produces and contributes to the bottom line results of their history. But as companies get bigger, they too often forget who brought them to the dance. Things like all hands involved, egalitarian, informality, market intimacy, daring, risk, speed, agility. Policies that emanate from ivory towers often have an adverse impact on the people out in the field who are fighting the wars or bringing the revenue. Real leaders are vigilant and combative in the face of these trends. It's basically saying, like, let's not get all, you know, focused on our roles and our seniority and our success and our complacency. It's about doing what needs to be done to win. And And I think that's really true. You know, I think if leaders don't jump in and help when necessary, if they're seen to be standing on the outside, then others will take the same view. I remember years and years and years ago, I introduced a training program into a law firm. And in the first session, all of the people that were below partner were there on time. The seats were all full. The front row was full. Partners all wandered in late, sat on the table on the back of the room. Second session, all the senior associates wandered in a bit late, sat on the tables in the back of the room. And I just, you know, I had a real go at the partners over their behavior and what influence they caused, you know, how as role models. And so if role models are leaders and leaders are detached, we're hiding behind data and stuff like that as opposed to being in the real world, then everyone else will be that way too. What about lesson number 4? Did anybody pick that one? How about anyone like to just read it for me?
Yes, I picked this one, Bradley.
Okay, go ahead.
Don't be afraid to challenge the pros, even in their own backyard. Learn from the pros, observe them, seek them out as mentors and partners. But remember that even the pros may have leveled out in terms of their learning and skills. Sometimes even the pros can become complacent and lazy. Leadership does not emerge from blind obedience to anyone. Xerox's Barry Rand was right on target when he warned his people that if you have a yes man working for you, one of you is redundant. Good leadership encourages everyone's evolution.
And this is Francis, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Francis, why did that appeal to you?
Yeah, I like the idea of being collaborative in a team and being able to have everyone bring their ideas forward, and also to challenge the leader of a team because other people might have input or ideas from a different point of view.
Yeah. Anybody else want to talk about lesson 4? Somebody? Yeah, I hear noise. I mean, who's worked in these sort of environments where everyone's afraid to say anything? Challenge the Napoleon, you know, everyone's holding back and not saying what they really want to say, and the whole environment's stifled. I think we've all had a job like that.
I have, Bradley.
Yeah.
When I worked in the bank, we actually, when the state bank was taken over by the Commonwealth Bank, there was a lot of this because there was new procedures that needed to be learnt, and the Commonwealth Bank people were pros, but they had been doing their system for so long that they did actually become quite complacent in how they did things. And when things were questioned by, you know, senior clerks, it was taken that you have no idea what you're talking about. It's just complacent. It's just lazy. This is how we do it. So it's quite a big learning curve, and a lot of state bankers actually overtook Commonwealth Bank people because they wanted to make things smarter and work better and be more, you know, bring in technology. And Commonwealth Bank people didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting time.
Very good. Hey, Ed, just on a side note, I'm pretty sure if my memory serves me right, that Mitch was tossing up taking a job at the state bank or setting up and going to work, not setting up his own, but going to work for where he ended up, that other infrastructure fund he was at for years. And I think he was tossing up the two and came to see me and said, what do you think I should do? And ended up going off working with, you know, that other fund he was with before he set up Lighthouse.
That's funny. Yeah, I don't know that history, but I'll have to ask about it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was it. Who else picked lesson 4?
Yeah, I did, Bradley.
Yeah.
Yes, previous employment, it was very hard to challenge the head person there. And when I did do that, it was very dismissive, you know, and didn't really want to know any other way other than the way that they wanted to go. And didn't bode well, you know, for the future, really. There was no progression, you know, only because it was all going one way.
You almost think that people like that too, who are that sort of minded, they don't even listen to themselves to change. You know, they don't listen to anyone else, but they're just stuck in this whole framed, you know, way of doing things. And doesn't matter whether it's them or someone else saying we should do it this way. They don't want to, and those all become dinosaurs.
Mm.
You don't keep evolving, and so important. All right, thanks, people. Lesson number 5. Who picked lesson number 5? Anyone?
Bradley. It's Kiara.
HR, go ahead and read this for us.
Sure. Lesson 5, never neglect details. When everyone's mind is dull or distracted, the leader must be doubly vigilant. Strategy, sorry, I'm trying to read it off your screen. I'm just going to read it off mine because it's a bit bigger.
Sure.
Strategy equals execution. All the great ideas and visions in the world are worthless if they can't be implemented rapidly and efficiently. Good leaders delegate and empower others liberally, but they pay attention to details every day. Think about supreme athletic coaches like Jimmy Johnson, Pat Riley, and Tony La Russa. Bad ones, even those who fancy themselves as progressive visionaries, they think they're somehow above operational details. Paradoxically, good leaders understand something else. An obsessive routine in carrying out the details begets conformity and complacency, which in turn dulls everyone's mind. That is why even as they pay attention to details, they continually encourage others to challenge the process. Do you want me to keep?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead and finish it.
Yeah. They implicitly understand the sentiment of CEO leaders like Quad Graphics Harry, I don't know how to say that word, Quadracci.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, Vatican's Lars Colland and the late Bill McGowan of MCI, who all independently asserted that the job of a leader is not to be the chief organizer, but the chief disorganizer.
Mm. Why did this resonate with you?
Well, at the moment with the pandemic, a lot of complacency is happening. So it's giving us as a business the opportunity to reshape it. And obviously myself as the general manager, I have the power to give people a bit of inspiration on how to continue to do their job, even though there's not much work to do. So I have to sort of almost not micromanage, but just make sure that everybody is doing their job properly at the moment, because there's not much work to be done, if that makes sense.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, and our business is massively based around details. We're a high-end portrait studio. So attention to detail is what people pay for, essentially, when they come to us. So yeah, that's
fair enough.
Yeah.
Very relevant for what you guys do. And anyone else want to comment about lesson 5? It's one of the, it's kind of like a real paradox, this one, because if you're the leader and you get caught up too much in the detail, you can miss the big picture, you can fall off the future and all of those sort of things. But at the same time, the devil's in the detail. And I know people that work for me, sometimes I probably get too detailed with them and they prefer I don't, but then I find if I don't, often things aren't done necessarily fully the way I want. Or, you know, I think a good leader is able to get out of the detail, but can be in the detail when necessary. You know, I think about like when you build a house, or you renovate a room, or you hire a builder to build a new kitchen. And if you don't look at every single detail, you're not going to get what you want. And it's the same thing in business, you know, like if you don't look at the details and you just leave things at a high level, you're probably not going to get the results that you want to get. So it's that balance between visionary strategy, but understanding that, you know, it all comes down to how it's implemented, and you got to have the right people doing it. You got to make sure it's being done the way you need it to be done. Lesson 6, anyone choose that one?
Hi, Bradley, it's Caroline. I chose that one. Do you want me to read it first?
Yeah, sure.
You don't know what you can get away with until you try. You know the expression, it's easier to get forgiveness than permission. Well, it's true. Good leaders don't wait for official blessing to try things out. They're prudent, not reckless. But they also realise a fact of life in most organisations. If you ask enough people for permission, you'll inevitably come up against someone who believes his job is to say no. So the moral is don't ask. Less effective middle managers endorse this sentiment. If I haven't explicitly been told yes, I can't do it, whereas the good ones believed, if I haven't explicitly been told no, I can. There's a world of difference between these two points of views. I sort of resonated with that one. I mean, I've been at Fletcher's nearly 10 years, and I think I've got to the point where you sort of trust me to make good decisions. And then if I'm not sure about something, you know, I will come to you to sort of get advice. But yeah, that's sort of how I feel, that you do trust me to make good decisions.
Yeah, one of the first things we're going to study in Covey is about empowerment, and this whole idea that, you know, do what you can do until you're told no is a lot better than waiting for people to tell you can do it. Otherwise, because you just don't do anything, you just get into that, you know, paralysis by analysis. Anyone else got a lesson 6 comment?
Hi Bradley, it's Sue Stone.
Hi Sue, go ahead.
I just sort of felt just because it hasn't been done that way before doesn't mean it can't be done that way. There's just so many creative people out there, and we all think differently, and you know, have different thoughts and likes and dislikes, and I just think we do get in a rut, we do get complacent, and sometimes it's good to just ask some other people. Sometimes the younger ones come up with the better decisions, and us older dinosaurs are like, oh, okay, never done it that way, but let's see. And it's something fresh and different, and you're always wanting to, like in our profession, find something, the point of difference that we are in compared to our competitors and things like that as well. So I'm all for, you know, asking everybody their opinions and getting some new ideas moving forward to just stay fresh up with, you know, current trends and things like that.
Yeah, cool, good ideas. You know, if you think from a point of view of barriers or boundaries that people have, like if this is someone's job, you guys can all see me, I assume, you know, this is someone's job, the boundary is probably here, you know, well beyond where their job is, that they have flexibility to think and do things, or else people are going to just feel like, you know, no innovation, they can't be creative, they just got to do what they're told. And so, you know, I think there are boundaries that go beyond where somebody's specific job is. And if you don't have that, then you do get a whole lot of brain dead people just doing tasks all day, and that doesn't get you anywhere. Especially these days where you have a lot of really bright people work for you who can think and don't want to be penned in too tight. Who chose 7? I'll read it then. Keep looking below surface appearances. Don't shrink from doing so just because you might not like what you find. If it ain't broke, don't fix it is the slogan of the complacent, the arrogant, or the scared. It's an excuse for inaction, a call to non-arms. It's a mindset that assumes or hopes that today's realities will continue tomorrow in a tidy, linear, predictable fashion. Pure fantasy. In this sort of culture, you won't find people who proactively take steps to solve problems as they emerge. Here's a little tip. Don't invest in these companies. You know, somebody said in the 90s, if we don't reinvent ourselves, somebody else will. And it's very much a truism that, you know, things change so rapidly that you just can't wait for there to be a problem or for it to be broken to look to improve it, because your competitors are getting continually more and more cost effective and better around you. And you have to keep changing and growing. John Lennon said, if you don't change with music, music changes without you. And it's very true. And that's the same thing about companies. You know, someone like Jack, who mentioned before that his company wasn't open to ideas and all that. Well, they're just going backwards, you know, because if you're here and everybody else is moving, then, you know, where your relative position is back there. You know, it just keeps getting further and further behind. So, you know, I think we have a very proud culture at Fletcher's of being very innovative. We're always looking to improve and change and grow, and we're not waiting for an excuse to do so. And I hope everybody feels that. Number 8, did anybody choose that one? How about someone who hasn't read this one yet? Give us a read of this one. No one?
I'm happy to read that one.
Okay, go for it.
So organization doesn't really accomplish anything. Plans don't accomplish anything either. Theories of management don't much matter. Endeavors succeed or fail because of the people involved. Only by attracting the best people will you accomplish great deeds. In a brain-based economy, your best assets are people. We've heard this expression so often that it's become trite. But how many leaders really walk the talk with this stuff? Too often, people are assumed to be empty chess pieces to be moved around by grand visors, which may explain why so many top managers immerse their calendar time in deal-making, restructuring, and the latest management fade. How many immerse themselves in the goal of creating an environment where the best, the brightest, the most creative are attracted, retained, and most importantly, unleashed?
Who is this who just read that?
Vanessa.
Hi, Vanessa. Sorry, I can't. It's not coming up. Like, it should move the person to the front screen, but it's not. And why, Vanessa, did this resonate with you?
I think team support and the team you have and build to accomplish things is important. You could be the most organized person. You can have all your like they said, all your calendars marked. You could tab things and have appointments, and unless you actually accomplish it and have a team that help you support that, you're not really going to get very far.
Yeah, very true. Anyone else have comments about lesson 8? I think this is a really important one, and that, you know, the success of you, the success of your team, your office, your business is about attracting the best people and letting them do their job and letting them, you know, accomplish things. And I can look back at pretty much anybody who's got a role at Fletcher's, and I can look at a predecessor of theirs or predecessor of that person's, and I can see who does a better job and who's been more creative and innovative and who's added more to the job spec. And, you know, sometimes you hire someone and the job was 7 things, but by the time they're done, the job is 27 things, because they can see all these other things that need to be done and can be done, and they add them to their whole, you know, inventory of work. And you know you've got somebody who's really capable when that's the situation, that they just keep expanding the role. They do what they're doing really well. You know, Caroline mentioned before, well, she's a perfect example of someone who's quite empowered, does a whole ton of things, does them without having to ask questions. She gets help when she needs it, and you know, just keeps growing the job. And that's what you're really looking for: hiring people who are creative, who can do their job, do it well, and keep expanding what the role is, taking on more and more, because it's not taking it from someone else, it's just adding to it, because things keep changing. You know, if I look at anything, marketing, for example, there might have been 7 channels in the early 2000s, and now there's like 40 channels to do marketing in. And we've required the team to help us to continually improve and increase those channels. And it's the same in other areas as well, how much more complex. As much as technology is supposed to make things easy, technology makes everything harder. And you got to think a lot more, and you got to implement and make sure things talk to each other and work together. And, you know, so you need people who can do that, who can put all those puzzles together. Lesson 9, anybody choose that one? Anybody like to read that one?
I'll read it if no one else will, Bradley.
Go ahead, Melissa.
Even though I don't like to, but Organisation charts and fancy titles count for next to nothing. Organisation charts are frozen, anachronistic photos in a workplace that ought to be as dynamic as the external environment around you. If people really followed organisation charts, companies would collapse. In well-run organisations, titles are also pretty meaningless. At best, they advertise some authority, an official status conferring the ability to give orders and induce obedience. But titles mean little in terms of real power, which is the capacity to influence and inspire. Have you ever noticed that people will personally commit to certain individuals who, on paper or on the organisation chart, possess little authority, but instead possess pizzazz, drive, expertise, and genuine caring for teammates and products? On the flip side, non-leaders in management may be formally anointed with all the perks and frills associated with high positions, but they have little influence on others, apart from their ability to extract minimal compliance to minimal standards.
Yeah, there's a stuff we'll do in Maxwell about express and implied leaders, you know, and who do you really follow? I've always been someone who's loath to create org charts or position descriptions because I think both of those are limiting. And interesting, I was reading something recently about how they believe position descriptions are vital to get the most out of people, but I always find them a bit limiting. And I've only ever created org charts because of some outside body has made us do it because they feel like we need to have one. But it's really about people who care to do the right thing. And like I said last week, it's, you know, the measure of the person is what they do when no one's watching. And when you can hire a whole group of people who take responsibility, feel empowered, feel they've got autonomy to do what they need to do within the system, then you have a lot of success. If you have a lot of people who want to hide behind reasons why they don't do things or don't get things done or don't fix things or don't help when it's necessary, then you really have a stifled environment where people feel frustrated and people feel that why should I go out and make this effort because others don't and nobody cares. And so it is really important to create that environment that is free of boundaries and restrictions for the most part, but some level of understanding where people fit in. Lesson 10. Anyone pick that one, like to read it? I'll jump in. Lesson 10, never let your ego get so close to your position that when your position goes, your ego goes with it. Too often, change is stifled by people who cling to familiar turfs and job descriptions. One reason that even large organizations wither is that managers won't challenge old, comfortable ways of doing things. But real leaders understand that nowadays, every one of our jobs is becoming obsolete. The proper response is to obsolete our activities before someone else does. Effective leaders create a climate where people's worth is determined by their willingness to learn new skills and grab new responsibilities, thus perpetually reinventing their jobs. The most important question in performance evaluation becomes not how well did you perform your job since the last time we met, but how much did you change it? Yeah, that's, you know, I was saying just a moment ago, that's what you really want for people who grow and develop and want to learn and take on more. And one of the things that I often say to people that, you know, who, like say, talk about a PA who is doing the role of a sales PA, and then they want to be a salesperson. Well, most of them will come to you and say, I want to be a salesperson. I think I'm ready. And you say, all right, well, how many listing appointments have you sat in this year? Oh, only 2, because my salesperson doesn't really take me in with them. And what have you done to become good at listing? Because being a salesperson is about eventually listing. Oh, you know, I've watched a couple of tapes and I went to that seminar a couple weeks ago, and I said, well, if you really want to succeed, learn the job before you're in it. You know, learn the next job that you want to have. And it's the same thing about this, you know, even in the role you're in, if you just limit yourself to what somebody tells you you should do, then you're really not going to be all that good in your job. At best, you're just going to, you know, meet the expectation. And there's so much more you can do. You can learn on the job, off the job. You can watch the person in the next seat, the person who's at the next level above you. You can ask to shadow them a little bit as to what they're doing. You can take your day off and spend it learning and growing. You can, do a whole lot of things to grow in the role and grow in the organization, and hence be ready when that time comes, or be ready to expand your job. So you can get paid a lot more for what you're doing. You can continue to progress. You can see that others see that your role is really important, and it's growing in importance because of what you've done to it. And I think that's a really important lesson in there for us. Lesson 11. Anyone pick that one? Quiet group today.
I'll read it if you like.
Good on you, Sarah.
Lesson 11, fit no stereotypes. Don't chase the latest management fads. The situation dictates which approach best accomplishes the team's mission. Flitting from fad to fad creates team confusion, reduces the leader's credibility, and drains organizational coffers. Blindly following a particular fad generates rigidity in thought and action. Sometimes speed to market is more important than total quality. Sometimes an unapologetic directive is more appropriate than participatory discussion. Some situations require the leader to hover closely, others require long, loose leashes. Leaders honour their core values, but they are flexible in how they execute them. They understand that management techniques are not magic mantras, but simply tools to be reached for at the right times.
Yeah, the right message at the right time, flexibility, not being too locked in, all these things are really important to be successful. Being able to improvise and allowing people to do the same that work for you. How many different situations do we face today? I mean, there's just nothing that's standard. And, you get things asked. I get things asked to me every day. It's the first time I've been asked that, and I got to look at it, and figure out the best answer. I called Jeremy this morning and said, hey, here's a question. Can we do this or do that? And he, and together we come up with an answer, because neither of us have faced that question before. It's just constant, that you've got to improvise. You've got to allow people in your organization to improvise. You've got to stay flexible. Look at COVID, how much we've had to re-engineer how we all live and what we do and how flexible we have to be. And when you put yourself in the right position, you can be more flexible. And I've pushed our team for the last few years to become more and more paperless and digital, and I've had a lot of people helping me at Fletcher's. And imagine what our life would have been like the last 6 months if we weren't using real-time agent, if property management hadn't gone completely digital, if we were stuck in the old ways. I can't even imagine how these firms that are still using paper authorities and all that have managed to function the last several months. How hard it must have been. And so you've got to keep looking ahead. You got to keep being flexible. How about number 12? Someone who hasn't read one yet. Come on, there's plenty of people online here that haven't said anything.
I'm happy to read it, but I didn't choose it.
That's right. Go ahead, Ian.
Perpetual optimism is a force multiplier. The ripple effect of a leader's enthusiasm and optimism is awesome. So it's the impact of cynicism and pessimism. Leaders who whine and blame engender the same behaviours amongst their colleagues. I'm not talking about stoically accepting organisational stupidity and performance incompetence with what me worry smile. I'm talking about the gung-ho attitude that says we can change things here, we can achieve awesome goals, we can be the best. Spare me the grim litany of realists, give me the unrealistic aspirations of the optimist any day.
How many of you worked for people who didn't inspire you, and you weren't inspired, and you didn't do very much? You just did your job. You came in every day and you did the tasks that you're asked to do, but you never gave more than that. And then you went to work for someone who did inspire you, and they showed a lot of enthusiasm and they asked you to be enthusiastic and they let you be enthusiastic, and all of a sudden you were doing lots more and lots of changes and your job became a lot more interesting. Isn't everyone in this group able to say that? I certainly know I've been in that position myself. And, you know, one of the reasons I always wanted to be the leader is I thought I was better at creating the right environment than the people that I often had to have leading me. And I thought, you know, if I want to have the career and the life I want to have, then I don't want to be answering to someone else. And because I worked for so many people who had no imagination and tried to keep you down. And I can't tell you the number of times I saw people who tried to keep you down by not sharing the information you needed, or if you showed enthusiasm, they tried to stamp you back down. They didn't reward enthusiasm. They didn't reward innovation. So certainly, again, I think Fletcher is someone who, as a company, is very optimistic, is very enthusiastic, is willing to grow and change all the time. And, you know, maybe not to everybody's pace. Maybe, you know, one of the things leaders do understand better than everyone else is all of the other dynamics at work at one time, which affects things. You know, some people just focus on what they're doing and they think everyone else can move as fast. But, you know, and often I face that with directors. We have a directors meeting and one or two directors will be excited about something, but they don't understand the bigger picture about how much is involved in systems to change things, or you know, how much has been invested in something already, and then they just want to swap and change to something else because it looks good. And you know, you have to keep that, unfortunately, a little bit of corral on people, but still trying to encourage optimism and innovation and stuff. Any other comments on that? Okay. Anyone pick 13? I'll read this. Powell's rules for picking people. Look for intelligence and judgment, and most critically, a capacity to anticipate, to see around corners. Also look for loyalty, integrity, and high energy drive, a balanced ego, and a drive to get things done. How often do our recruitment and hiring processes tap into these attributes? More often than not, we ignore them in favor of length of resume, degrees, prior titles. String of job descriptions. A recruit held yesterday seems to be more important than the one today. What can they contribute tomorrow, or how well their values mesh with those of the organization? You can train a bright, willing novice in the fundamentals of your business fairly readily, but it's a lot harder to train someone to have integrity, judgment, energy, balance, and the drive to get things done. Good leaders stack the deck in their favor right in the recruitment phase. Well, I believe that so much. You know, you hire on these sort of qualities, then you worry about necessarily what somebody's done before, and you almost always win because most people can learn the job or the tasks. It's really about having the right attitude and aptitude, and those are the two most important qualities in people. Do they have the attitude to want to grow and want to be a force in their job? Do they have the aptitude to do what you need them to do? If they can meet those two, their history isn't anywhere near as important as what their future can bring them. And I have a very strong record of promoting people way above their so-called, you know, what they might be entitled to earn in terms of the job, and they've lived up to it and done heaps. And I think that's super important to hire those sort of right people. Lesson 14. Anyone?
I had this
Ed,
one.
Good on you, Ed. I can anticipate things.
That's it. Great leaders are almost always great simplifiers who can cut through argument, debate, and doubt to offer a solution everybody can understand. Effective leaders understand the KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid. They articulate vivid, overarching goals and values, which they use to drive daily behaviours and choices among competing alternatives. Their visions and priorities are lean and compelling, not cluttered and buzzword laden. Their decisions are crisp and clear, not tentative and ambiguous. They convey an unwavering firmness and consistency in their actions, aligned with the picture of the future they paint. The result, clarity of purpose, credibility of leadership, and integrity in organisation.
Is this one that resonated with you?
Yes, yeah, definitely. I think mainly because in finance and also in consulting environments, I think we often do a really good job of making simple concepts very complex. Sometimes maybe deliberately, if I'm being cynical, but I think, you know, of the people I've worked for, I think the people who can cut through on the surface very seemingly complex concepts and initiatives and really convey them in a way that's understandable to, you know, anybody on the street. Those are the most effective communicators and the best at, I guess, getting engagement from both internal, external stakeholders.
Yeah, you think that organizations or individual leaders who are on that former style, that rather than what you just said, they do it because of ego and because of they think, well, they can bamboozle people. And if I know some words that you don't know, or I know some concepts you don't know, then I'm more powerful than you. And that's not the way to get people engaged, either being clients or others. I can remember sitting in meetings with some lawyers who spoke, and they would say, like, you know, 30 to 50 or 100 words, and you didn't even know what they're talking about, you know. And I saw that at times in front of clients, you know. And I can remember once saying, this partner it was about occupational health and safety, and he was going on and on, and I could see that the clients who we were meeting for the first time to try to win them over were looking at him like, are you from another planet? And I said that, you know, I was new as CEO of that firm, and I said, look, greatest respect, I won't say his name, partner. I said, do you understand anything he's talking about? Because I don't, and you're looking to me like you don't. And they said, no. I said, you need to talk in more simple terms. Let's lose all the legal jargon and just talk in English about what you're trying to achieve. And yeah, it was a big coming off a pedestal for him. I think it's really important that the people around you don't feel as if you're talking down to them or that they're not understanding what you're on about. Number 15, numbers. We'd like to see numbers and things. Anyone choose this one? This one is saying that, firstly, use a formula P, which stands for probability, equals 40 to 70% of the percentage of information required. In other words, you don't need everything to get it right. Once the information is in the 40 to 70% range, go with your gut. In other words, if you're waiting for 100% of anything, you're probably never going to make a decision. That procrastination is really the killer of most things. That analysis by paralysis sort of issue. And I'm a really firm believer that when you have enough information to make your decision, you make it and you move on. And if you don't make it, then you sort of stifle everybody. I often say that, you know, if Fletchers can make 20 decisions and implement them pretty well, whilst our competitor makes 5 decisions and implements them well, we're going to be almost 4 times ahead. And I really believe in getting things done and moving. And you don't often have all the information. You have enough as a leader to get things done. Anyone else have any comment on that? Okay. Number 16, anyone choose this one? Someone like to just read it who hasn't read one yet? I have to take that as a no. Lesson 16, the commander in the field is always right. and the rear echelon is wrong unless proved otherwise. Too often the reverse defines corporate culture. This is one of the main reasons why leaders like Ken Iverson, Percy, whoever, Richard Bramson, keep their corporate staff to bare bones minimum. How fewer than 100 central corporate staffers can control a $30 billion plus ABV, or around 25 or $3 billion new corp or Virgin respectively. Shift the power and financial accountability to the folks who are bringing in the beans, not the ones who are counting or analyzing them. I always say that the tail shouldn't wag the dog. You know, it's interesting because recently we were looking at a system for changing the way we use Campaign Agent. And the major reason to change it was going to benefit the vendor and the salesperson. The major reason not to change it, it was going to create more work for the finance team. And we decided that, subject to fixing a few things, that we'd need to implement it because it's going to make it better for the client, better for our salespeople who are out there trying to deal with it. It shouldn't be driven by the admin at the back end. Anyone have any comments about that? Okay, we're getting to the end. 17, anyone have that one?
I didn't have it, but I'm happy to read it if you like.
Sure, Sandy.
Lesson 17, have fun in your command. Don't always run at a breakneck pace. Take leave when you've earned it. Spend time with your families. Surround yourself with people who take their work seriously, but not themselves. Those who work hard and play hard. Herb Fitzmore, Kessler of Southwest Air, and Anita of the Body Shop would agree. Oh, hang on, now it's a bit big. That's all good. Seek people who have some balance in their lives, who are fun to hang out with, who like themselves too, and who have some non-job priorities which they approach with the same passion that they do with their work. Share time. Spare me the grim workaholic or the pompous, pretentious professional. I'll help them find jobs with my competitor. I actually really like this because we spend so much time at work with people that we work with, and sometimes to relieve the pressure, and sometimes in property management it can be quite the pressure cooker. You have to be able to laugh at stuff, and we share stories that people ring in and tell us that they can't get their oven working when all they really need to do is set the time on it. So we hear a lot of funny stories, and as property managers, you get to share those. But when the pressure's on and you go. Yeah. And that could be that you're trying to lease 5 particular properties in 1 week. So it's head down, let's go. But as a leader, you need to be able to teach your team to balance their life out and make sure that they're balancing their work time and taking their breaks and being away from that pressure as well as having that laugh.
Yeah, it's got to be balanced, doesn't it? People need to be able to enjoy. You're there 8 hours a day, you know, enjoy the people around you and let the pressure off at times. And you do get that weird thing going on with clients, and, you know, and yeah, I get it fully. Number 18, got 2 more. I think it's just, last one. Anyone choose 18 before I read it? Command is lonely. Harry Truman was right. Whether you're a CEO or head of a project team, the buck stops here. You can encourage participative management and bottom line employee involvement, but ultimately, the essence of leadership is the willingness to make the tough, unambiguous choices that will have an impact on the fate of the organization. I've seen too many non-leaders flinch from this responsibility. Even as you create informal, open, collaborative corporate cultures, prepare to be lonely. It's basically just saying that, you know, you got to make decisions. You got to be responsible for those. Not everyone's going to like them. You can't try to do it to please everybody. You know, if you try to please everybody, you're running in a million different directions. You're doing so many things, and people have all these ideas and things they want to do, and you know, sometimes they're great ideas, and sometimes they are really good ideas, but they're just not the right time frame. Sometimes they could be great ideas in a different environment. Sometimes they're just not good ideas. But as a leader, you make decisions, and you make so many decisions all the time that people aren't going to always agree with them. And a lot of times they don't maybe fully understand them, because you can't take the time always to share 100 things going on with everybody. It's not appropriate, nor is it often able to be done. All right, Colin Powell has interesting lessons. The thing about Covey is now he's going to break it down and teach us how we can apply things in work and how we can understand them from a more of a sort of a theory point of view. Now, Sarah, I did something I didn't do, is I didn't go into my.
Did you break it?
No, I didn't even open it. I forgot. So let me just.
Make sure you're Bradley.Brown.
Yeah, oh yeah. I got so many Bradleys and Google Drives. Why does it want to verify it's me, Sarah? This is going to be, I don't want to do this. I'm going to just try again.
Did you put your password in?
Well, I shouldn't have to. Saying session expired. Sorry, guys, I forgot to log in beforehand. I have so many different Google accounts. Help me, Mrs. Wizard.
If you can't do it, I can text you mine. No,
I
it'll
just
be.
don't know which one it is.
Do you not remember it without autofill?
It didn't just accept it when I autofilled.
Maybe don't autofill, just type it in.
I don't know, Sarah. That's why I hate using your technology, girl. Just bear with me a second. If I go into these sheets, I should be in Bradley.Brown. No.
It looks like the second one there. Yep.
Cool. No.
I'll make sure you got access. Actually, you're trying to get into a Google sheet. Just try to click on apps, I think. Go to Google Drive. And now you should have it. You've gone into the wrong thing. Now you should be right. There you go.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Right.
Okay. So let's get this out of the way. All right. Welcome to Stephen Covey. Stephen Covey is famous for 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which was his first book, and I think maybe the highest selling business book in history. He was voted one of the top 100 most influential people in America in the 20th century. He impacted a tremendous amount of companies and individuals. And big part of it was because he took all of these concepts that had been floating around for a century, and he put them into a very meaningful way that people could understand it. and apply it in their own work, personal life, any sort of involvement you have with other people. And I think his stuff is quite brilliant. He then came out with principle-centered leadership, which was how companies should more effectively run themselves and do things. And between the two of them, 7 Habits and Principle-Centered Leadership, you get this really great system for how people can interact with each other and how they can be most successful. And we're going to mix the two as we work through Covey over several sessions. And a lot of these involve some exercises that you need to do and spend some few minutes doing them as we go through it. In the PDF we gave you, in the Word doc we gave you in the last email, you've got those notes. So when it comes to the exercises, you can just open up your own Word doc there and type in your answers. And if you have questions or comments as we go, by all means, please interject, because otherwise I'm just going to be talking at you for the next 45 minutes. So feel free to interject wherever you see fit to do so. And then once we finish Covey, our next one will be John Maxwell, who breaks them down even a little bit further for us. And I really like the way these two fit together. Leadership and management are both centrally important. And we're just going to try to spend a few minutes defining each of those and what they mean. When we look at leadership, some of the things we identify with leadership is creating that vision, or as Colin Powell was saying, that purpose. Why are we here? What are we trying to achieve? How do we get everybody committed to be going in that same direction for something? And that's not easy, but that's what it's about. We have to plan what the future is going to look like. We talked before in change management that leadership has to be looking ahead, has to be able to plot the course, has to be able to help people see beyond the current. And often people don't want to go beyond the current because they're comfortable with that. You know, when we introduced real-time agent and got more and more digital, a lot of people in the team didn't want to do it because they were happy using their authorities and they were happy using the way they'd always done it. But, you know, I could see where the future was and that we had to do it. And there was no question we had to do it. We had to become fully electronic, not because I saw COVID around the corner, but because we had to get more and more efficient and easier for everybody to do everything. And as lawyers and accountants expect to get these documents electronically, we had to be able to facilitate that. We have to be able to communicate that to people so everybody understands what we are trying to achieve. You know, it's one thing to have something in your head, but it's another thing for people to be able to understand what you're trying to do and how they participate and what it means for them and how they can benefit from it, etc. We have to get people enthusiastic or else it doesn't happen. How do you create that enthusiasm? How do you get people to buy into what you want? Remember, what's in it for them? And those two things we talked about before, how does it help the organization and how does it help that individual and what can they do to participate? It's critical in that. You then have to empower that team called management, which is kind of everybody, but to deliver the vision. They have to be able to do it. And leaders can't do all of that themselves. They have to get everybody else going, all right, I get it. And, you know, interesting, years and years ago, I was at a luncheon with Bob Joss, who was an American who was brought over to run Westpac. And he'd been here for a few years, and Westpac was really in trouble before he got here, and he helped really turn it around. And I was at this small lunch with him, like 25 people, and I got to ask a question, and I said, you know, how do you impact 25,000 people? You know, how do you get your message across to 25,000 people, which is how many worked for Westpac at the time? And he said, it's like being at a pond and throwing that pebble and watching the ripples go. You just got to keep throwing the pebbles and the ripples. So the first ripple hits your board, and the next one hits your management team, and the next one hits their direct reports, and the next one hits the people that work for them. And eventually that message just travels through all of those layers to get to everybody that it needs to. And so you've got to be able to really impact your board, and your board has to be able to really impact the management team, and the management team has to be, impact their supervisors and so forth, or else it falls flat. Whereas management is more this day-to-day process, making sure that processes we need to do our job are in place, that they're going to do what we need them to do. We have the controls we need to make sure we're managing risk. We're managing the issues between one person and another, and and all of those controls that you need in an organization in terms of how much can we spend, and what can we do, and how much can I change something, and how much can I affect my own job, and how much can I affect the way we deal with clients. And you got to have that under control. You have to have people who are able to deliver what is suggested is our purpose, is our vision, is our future. You got to have the right people. We can't have successful firm if we don't have the right directors running our offices, or the right marketing people behind the scenes, or our office managers, or you have to have the right people. You have to have the resources that they need. Colin Powell said, give people what they need: the education, the learning, the tools, the weapons, whatever it happens to be. If they don't have what they need, they can't do their job. And that's one of the things that management's responsible for. Does everybody have what they need? Do they have the computers they need? Do they have the phone system working the way they need it? In COVID, we've had to really change things and add lots of things and lots of tools and lots of systems. And very little of that was actually a leadership issue. It was management in terms of getting it in place, and you can all see the benefits of that versus not. When we look at an organization, a lot of them, and you've all worked for them, where there's not a lot of new ideas, mixed directions, people aren't sure what they're meant to do, very little in the way of initiative, because if you have initiative, you get shot down, you get hit in the head. People looking for primary satisfaction off the job. I have to laugh at that one. I always do every time I see it, because when I went to my second law firm, and basically the organization was just dead in the water. And as I said, anybody who had get up and go got up and left. And one of the partners came to see me and said, I've been thinking about something for a long time, and I wanted to run it by you. This is a tax partner. He said, I'm thinking of taking up French. What do you think? And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, to be frank, I'm so bored here at work that I was trying to do something outside of work that might stimulate me a little bit. Well, that was pretty much, that whole organization was just brain dead. If your organization's like that, then it's not empowered one. Fortunately, Fletcher's is empowered. There's a lot of people from other companies on here, and hopefully the ones you work for, you feel that as well, that that's not how you would describe your company. And when Covey wrote this stuff in the 80s, late 80s, 90s, there was a lot more companies who were stuck in the mud and weren't progressive. And I think today they're on an endangered species list, because if you're not evolving pretty quickly today, you just don't hang around for very long. And, there's some incredible statistics about the longevity of companies. And when you think about, Fletcher's, how we've survived 101 years, it's truly a remarkable feat. If you go back to the year 1900, and there's a term called Fortune 500 companies in America, which are the biggest 500 companies. The biggest 500 companies in 1900, by the year 2000, there was only 4 of those still in existence. Only 4 out of 500. If you look at, and that means they might have merged with someone else, but they were gone in their own right, or gone fully, bought out, sold, went bankrupt. In 1950, the top 100 law firms in America, there was only 10 left by the year 2000. you know, there's no right of survival, that's for sure. Empowerment is this concept of people being able to give their mind and their heart, as well as their hands. There's a famous old quote in Quality about the lathe worker who on his retirement was handed a gold watch, and they said, speech. And he said, well, what I have to say is that for the last 20 years, you've rented my hands, but you could have had my heart and my mind for free. And you'd really hate to think, you know, that any of us in this room here actually feel as if all we give is our hands. They did a study of white collar workers in America, and it was done by the Covey Franklin Institute. And they surveyed, I don't know, a lot of numbers, like 100,000 workers. And the average level of employment, which means if Melissa is able to give 100% in her job, Sandy's able to give 100% in her job, Sarah's able to give 100% in her job, what percentage are they actually giving day in and day out? When they go home at night, if they were to fill in a survey and said, I was capable of giving 100, and I gave 25, or I gave 35. The average in America, which is economically one of the most productive countries in the world, the average white collar worker of that survey was 25% employment. So on average, people felt that 3/4 of what they had to give every day wasn't given. And I know myself, when I worked in a job where I felt I wasn't able to give what I was capable of, I was exhausted at the end of every day. Versus when you are giving what you're capable of and you feel really buzzed by it, you go home enthusiastic, not the other way. So this concept of empowerment is about giving your all to the job because you're allowed to. And the critical, you know, issue of empowerment is personal empowerment. You have to feel that you have control over things around you. You spend time on things that you can have an impact on. In other words, you don't feel as if you're just a tool where you're there every day just to give your hands and nobody cares about what you think and you have no chance of improving the job, improving your job, improving anyone else's job. You just told you got to do 1 to 10. It's like a temp. You know, you bring a temp in the old days to work reception for a week. You don't expect the temp to change things. You don't expect the temp to be empowered. You expect the temp to just do what they're supposed to do. You know, just do the tasks. Here's your 10 things to do all day. Do those. But if you had a full-time receptionist, you'd certainly hope that that receptionist felt that they could evolve the role, that they could make suggestions, they could make changes, they could make that job their own, they could add things to it, they could see how they could make this bookings work better, they could see how they could make putting together personal information about people better and evolve and feel that empowerment.
These are what I call the 5 metastasizing emotional cancers. And if you get involved in these 5 things, I will guarantee you it will create such static and such compartmentalization inside your nature, you will never really find your voice. The attitude and spirit of criticism, of comparing, of complaining, of competing for a sense of your own worth, and of contending. That is a mean spirit kind of argument, kind of a contention. These are 5 metastasizing cancers. Criticizing, complaining, comparing, competing, not in a basketball game or in a marketplace, but competing for a sense of personal worth, and then contending. The spirit of contention. Now, if you want to see how serious this problem is, watch the raise of hands right here in this group of many, many hundreds of people. Think carefully about this question. How many seriously believe that the vast majority of the workforce in your organizations possess more talent, more capability, more creativity, etc., than their present jobs require or even allow them to use. How many agree? Now look around. Look around. That's literally almost every hand. And the finding that we have all around the world, a profound alienation, disempowerment of the workforce in organizations. People have not found their voice. There is no passion, which necessitates external motivation, supervision, psych up, hovering over, check up. The whole panoply of techniques used by the industrial age. Now, how many also feel a lot of pressure to produce more for less? Look, same hands. Now just put those questions side by side. I mean, just look at those two questions. Here's all this capability, this talent, this capacity, and this tremendous need to produce, and we can't even use it.
That's that whole idea that organizations stifle people. You get people in with talent and you don't let them use it. My son was talking to me on the phone a couple days ago. He spent a year working for Airbnb in recruitment, and his job was to recruit for diversity. He was supposed to hire people who were of a minority, and to be frank, females as well, because they don't have enough females represented in management. And you know, at the end of 12 months, he'd read through 5,000 applicants. He'd put up 120 people and not one was hired. Because they actually didn't want to hire anyone for diversity. They just wanted to pretend they did. So he lost so much initiative and feeling like he's wasting his time because he kept putting up candidates who weren't getting anywhere. Whereas now he's working for a company, a high-tech company, and he's already employed like 5 people in the first month or 6 weeks he's been there. So Covey talks about these different requirements for empowerment, and we're going to work through these. This could look quite imposing when you just look at it, you know, like this, but we're going to work through all of these different issues about how you ultimately get people who are empowered in your organization. And it starts in the center point of trustworthiness, and we're going to, you know, deal with all that. But we're going to go through all of these sections as we work through principle-centered leadership. So you have a task to do, which is to look at why you aren't empowered. If there's any level of you that you feel that you're not, why is that within your own job? And you know, I think your next task is figuring. Sorry, I was just having a look ahead because the notes I'm working off are previous ones. So why in your own role, if you feel that you're not fully empowered, why aren't you? What's getting in the way? Is it mixed rules? Is it hierarchical issues? Is there mixed directions? Is it, you know, you lack your own initiative? You're not allowed to have initiative. You don't agree with what's going on. Just spend a few minutes brainstorming yourself, and you don't have to share these with us, but why do you feel that maybe you're not as empowered as you should be? And what could you do in doing that as you're writing them down? What could you do to change that? What could you do to have a positive effect on that level of empowerment? So go ahead and spend a few minutes to do that. Now it says 5 minutes, so give it a real go. Think about that a lot. And you can think about it in your organization as well. If you want to take it beyond your own role, where could your organization be more empowered? and off you go. So I'll just give you sort of that time. Okay. You know, I don't have as any sort of expectation or requirement that anybody offers anything about what they've just written, but would anyone like to make any comment or even about the thought process or say anything about whatever they've written? Just if you do, unmic and share it with us. If not, we'll move on.
I feel.
Hi, Bradley. Hi, everyone.
Oh, hi. Sorry.
Go ahead, Ian.
Sarah.
Hi, Ian.
You,
How are you going?
Sarah.
What time is it over there?
Yeah. It is just gone 9:30 in the morning.
Oh, okay. Not too bad.
Yeah, where it's probably about 34 degrees outside, I'd say.
Ian is in Dubai, for anyone who doesn't know.
But can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Like how clear is it on a, say, a scale of 1 out of 10? How clear? Well,
10.
how clear is it? 8 out of 10?
It was
7?
a 10. Yeah, go ahead, Ian. What did you want to add?
Okay. Well, I was just thinking about this one, and I'm thinking this could be a hard topic for people to brainstorm when their boss is sitting there in the chair. So I'm sort of thinking, you know, he's got an HR background, he's sitting in the chair, he's making notes. You know, why aren't you people empowered at Fletcher's? I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this would be a hard one to answer truthfully. But, you know, thinking about some of the things that you said before, Bradley, like one thing that really gets me is my job is pretty autonomous. So I do have the power. I am empowered to do things because I guess my boss is like the second top guy in the company. So he's in charge of water production. And then I'm in a shared role where my other boss is the EVP in charge of the distribution network. So I'm sort of between two camps. And their boss is the CEO and MD. So I'm very empowered with what I can do here, but culturally there's a language barrier, and also some things move at a slow pace. Some things go quickly, but some things move at a slow pace. I mean, the people here are very tolerant and they're forward looking, which is great. But my challenge is what you said before, the measure of a person is what they do when no one is looking. I'm in my office, the door is closed. What am I working on? So that's a challenge for me. So I know what the priorities are here. I know what's important. And so I focus on what's important for them and for the people of Dubai. The other thing I really like, what you said before, you know, learn the next job you want to have, learn your next job before you're in it. To me, that's all about lifelong learning. Everyone should be, you know, doing a course, learning something, reading a magazine all the time. I think that's my point of view. You should be growing throughout your life. And the last one is the critical issue of empowerment is a personal empowerment. You must feel as though you have control over things. People probably don't realize, you know, they do have control. You think someone is telling you what to do, but the control lies with to whom you give the power. Are you big enough to stand up and say, like, I don't exactly agree with what they're saying, I'm going to go with this, and actually have a go and try and do it? Or are you going to give them the power and say, all right, you know, I might get told off by my supervisor, maybe I shouldn't try this, or you're going to get out of your comfort zone and actually try and do it? So, I mean, lots of things that have been said so far resonate, and I don't want to get off the track or take up too much time, but this is a tough one for people to answer really honestly if your boss is sitting there in the room. So just go back to that. So just to finish up, just try and think about things in your own little situation, you know, not necessarily about Fletcher's, but how you do things. So I don't know, I'll just leave it there and just say, you know, there's a few things that really resonated with me, but the key thing is, what do you do when people aren't watching you? How do you spend your time? That's a key thing with me. I have to really work on that one. That's a real tough one for me. Okay,
Good on you.
over
Thank
to
you,
you.
Ian. Well, I think that the people that work at Fletcher's would feel that they can speak pretty freely because they do all the time. Certainly never stops Sarah or Caroline or Beth from coming in my office, or Jackie, and telling me what they think. That's for sure. Does anybody else have anything else they would like to add on this point before we continue moving on?
Bradley, it's Mike. I just want to reiterate what you just said. I actually disagree with that comment that we don't have that opportunity to air any grievances or anything else. I think the communication within the company's been excellent. And I think that there is a feeling that you can go to your managers or directors or directly to you if needs be. And I really think, having worked in another couple of companies, the opportunities that have been provided in terms of some of those areas on the chart, with your self-directed and your win-wins and all those types of things, I think a lot of those are in place, in the organisation, and it really does come down to the personal attributes. And if you're motivated, the tools and everything are there for you to be successful.
It's funny when people work for me directly, like say Brittany, my PA, or Sarah, and they're in my office regularly. When I hire them, one of the first things I do is I sit them down and I say that obviously we're not married, we're not related. We're here both to do the best job that we can do every day, day in and day out for Fletcher's. And it's not personal. And if I tell you things I think you're doing really well, it's because I think you're doing really well. If I tell you things that I think need improvement or things that you didn't get right, I'm not meaning it to be harsh or critical. I'm just telling you because that's what I think. And I think you could have done a better job. And I'm going to tell you that. And the same thing back at me. If you feel like I could help you to do your job better, or I'm not doing something right, tell me. And I think that philosophy has rippled out right across Fletcher's, because I don't think we should be taking things personally, because we should be taking things that if you can't do your job as well as possible, then that's going to impact your ability to help Fletcher's as much as you can. And that's really why we're all there. That's why we spend our days there. So I think we have a pretty empowered culture, but it depends on how other individuals, feel themselves. Anyone else want to comment about this at all from their own perspective before we continue on?
I would, Bradley. Coming from quite a large real estate company prior to Fletcher's, I do have to say that the directors that I work for are fantastic. They have made it such an open door policy to come and speak to them. They care about their people that work for them. And I think that's the reason that I stay with Fletcher's, is because of that culture that has flowed in from what I've known of Fletcher's people, of all of the Fletcher's franchise owners or directors or whoever they are. They actually care about their staff. And I think that is what makes a big difference with the Fletcher's. That's, they've empowered me to look after the property management side of our business. That happened earlier this year, and it became a really big challenge when COVID came in, that we had to think of how we were going to make us still strong. So I think we've sort of got that covered, and I think they empower me to be the best that I can be, and they do give feedback when it's not. If I can handle things better, if I can do things better. So they make it competitive, but yeah, there's always things that you need to strive for.
Good on you. Any other comments about this? So it's this whole idea that you got to focus within yourself to create an empowered culture. It starts with you, starts with ourselves. Two people sitting right next to each other, one could feel as if they've got a great deal of autonomy and the other doesn't. And it's probably related to them individually, because I believe that if you feel that you've got it, then you'll push the boundaries and you'll go and speak to somebody when you need to. You know, my first firm I worked for in LA was not an empowered culture. It was a bully culture. But yet, you know, I spoke up many, many times and felt I could make change, and that I didn't give in to that. And I think it starts with you. And I think that's a healthy way to look at this. And what Covey's on about is that if you can feel empowered, then you can live and work in an empowered culture and you can make it better for everyone. And we're going to explore how you actually do that. This is the only sort of Covey concept we're going to cover today because of time. And it's fascinating. And I think this is one of the most brilliant things to remember the rest of your life. And I hear people who have done my course all the time saying, I'm living in a circle of concern or a circle of influence. I'm in a circle of concern. I got to get out of it. You know, this should stay with you because it is a really powerful tool to understand. So basically, there's a circle of influence and a circle of concern. And a circle of influence is what we feel we have control over and power over, that I can affect this. I can do something about this. It's within my sphere of influence to do something about this. Our circle of concern is what we feel like it's beyond me. That's not a decision I can make. You know, the environment's terrible, but it's not my thing. It's the directors. It's up to them. I need all new computer, and I can't get one because the director's not going to let me. So I'm going to just work with this bad computer. Those are all circle of concern items. And, you know, the more we can focus on our circle of influence, the more we can push it out to make the circle of concern as small as possible. The more we can think we can influence things, the less we live in a circle of concern. And when I think about that, I say to people, for example, they can't make the decision to go and buy a new desktop computer when their computer isn't powerful enough. But they can ask their supervisor to come and sit down and see what happens when they try to open these programs or do something they need to do and how long it takes, or how the computer crashes 3 times. And they can get their supervisor on board to go and lobby for them to get a new computer. Therefore, by doing that, they're living in a circle of influence. They may not have the decision to buy the computer, but they have the ability to influence someone who can get them that computer, therefore living in a circle of influence. If they just sit there and say, my computer sucks, keeps crashing, but I can't get a new one, that, you know, they're not going to buy me one. My supervisor, you know, doesn't care. All those things is circle of concern, and you just get more and more closed in. You show less initiative, you show less drive, you show less ambition, you show less productivity, and it just gets bad for everyone. The more we think we can influence the outcome, the more comfortable we feel that we're in control of our environment, and therefore we can be empowered. Does that make sense to you guys?
Just on that, I think when you have people in your department or something and they don't, you know, exert, I guess, their circle of influence, it can be quite frustrating. Like if they're sitting there with a bad computer, but they don't tell the people that could do something for them and just keep getting angrier and angrier, that's, you know, not a great environment to be in, if that makes sense.
So what can you do as a leader to make sure that your own circle of influence is as positive as possible?
Well, I think it's, yeah, important that you create an environment where they feel that they can come to you. And if they do come to you, you make something happen for them. Because if you, for example, let them down on one occasion, they might then think, oh, well, that person's not going to do something for me the next time.
Yeah, you know, pick up 2 things we said in the first session about that. One is that when you help somebody overcome something, they become more loyal. You know, that banking study I told you guys about, the only way to get a 4.5 or a 9 out of 10 or 4.5 out of 5 is to actually have heard that there's a problem and fix it for people to get that loyalty. The other thing is when you ask people, you have to follow up. Or when you express that you're open to hear from them if there's any issues or concerns, you want them to be able to work as well as possible and be happy in the job, and then you don't do what they need, they'll be less willing to come back the second time. And as a leader, living in your circle of influence is influencing your team to be the best they can be. And going up to your team very directly and saying, if there's anything that's happening that keeps you from being as productive as you can be, can you tell me? Because, you know, I want you to be feeling every day that you gave your 100%, that you feel productive, that you're able to do your job well. And if there's any reason why that's ever not the case, I would really like to know that. And that's that living in that circle of influence. And then when you hear from them, take it in the right way. And we'll talk about feedback later on in this cubby sessions. But the more you can feel that you create a circle of influence environment, the more the people that are in that will feel the same. Others with comments or thoughts about this point? Nothing? Got nothing?
Okay, well, Sue Stone again, sorry. Yeah, so I've worked in various other companies, environments, things like that. So I think it's really important that when you do go to your bosses, managers, whatever, that you're actually heard, because so many times in various other roles and that you've come with good ideas or recommendations and they just fall on deaf ears. Like they go, oh yeah, that's a good idea, and then nothing happens. Like, you know, they become complacent or whatever and don't actually implement any of these changes. And then you get to like a scenario like now, something happens, you know, it could be just like, I think we should rotate the admin girls so they all know each other's jobs, so that if something happens to one of them, someone else can pick up with just simple things like that. And, you know, it's not until something happens to one of them that they go, oh gosh, we haven't trained all these people. So I think it's really important that it's heard, and then these things that are recommended, that they're trialled or, you know, discussed further to implement them. Because otherwise, if your ideas keep on falling on deaf ears, you give up. Yeah. You can't be bothered going, you think, oh, well, they haven't implemented anything else we've recommended. So, you know, so I think that open communication and that you're actually being heard is really important too, and the things are being actioned.
That in itself is like almost a circular thing about a circle of influence. You know, like if you make comments and they're ultimately ignored, and then you feel that making more comments would be a waste of time, then you start to live in that circle of concern. I can't make change. I can't have an impact on change because they don't listen to me. You know, you sort of take the flip side and say, well, don't give up on your circle of influence. If they haven't heard you the first time and made change, go back again and say, you know, I did make these comments and I think they're important and I'd love to have them addressed one way or the other. Either you think it's a good idea and we're going to do it and let's do it, or you think for these reasons it's not necessarily appropriate or the right idea. I'd love to know that. And again, living in your circle of influence is saying, don't give up. Maybe go and talk to someone below that person, but in between you and that person, and say, hey, I thought this was a really good thing, but I raised it and nothing ever happened. What do you think? Can I get you on board? Can we go together and do that? Whatever it takes. The idea is that circle of influence says you can influence the outcome. And if it's important to you to get the right outcome, then you don't give up. You keep trying to influence it. And I get the latter, but the latter is living in a circle of concern where you think, oh, I raised it, nothing happened, I won't say anything next time. You know, then you don't get what you want. You don't live in the environment you want to live into. Everybody's the loser for it. And, you know, the fact is that if you raise something with someone and they don't do it, it doesn't necessarily mean they don't want to do it or think it's a good idea. They might have just, number one, forgot. Number two, they've got other priorities. Number three, maybe they didn't think it was a perfect idea, but if you sat down and you worked through it, you might come up with a better way of doing it. It's not easy juggling everything, to be frank. You got all these different shareholders and stakeholders and views, and you know, it's never easy, but it's never black and white either. But the whole idea of circle of influence is don't give up. Draw on another way to do it. Figure out another approach to get the outcome you want, because if you care, then you want it to be the way you want. If you don't care, then you become that person that's not empowered. You're just giving your hands every day, and that's not very satisfying anyway. Better off to be very empowered, to feel that you're living in a circle of influence. And there's not much you can't control, ultimately. I mean, you can't make all decisions, but you can get a lot of things you want, and you can get things the way you want them to be for the most part. Anyone else have any comments about circle of influence, circle of concern before we finish up?
Bradley, it's Mike. Like out of the work situation, I guess from a mental health perspective, this is particularly something that a lot of people have probably concentrated on, is the things that they can control, being in that circle of influence, and the things that we can't, with lockdowns and all that type of thing, being more in the circle of concern. And I think it's probably really appropriate that from a mental stimulation point of view, that you look towards the things that you can control, and that's routine and all of the little things that we have been able to do in the job, and then that pushes those other things, makes them smaller in terms of the overall concept in the day, and I guess makes it easier to get through.
Very much so. Again, focusing on what you can control, what you can influence, what you can make happen is a lot healthier than focusing on what you can't. And you focus on your circle of concern, you just get this feeling of, and weighed down and beaten down, and there's no real value in that. So yeah, from a mental health point of view, living in a circle of influence where you feel like I can get these wins, I can do these things. I decided in April I was going to be living in Groundhog Day, and working from home and doing the same thing, and so I've chosen to do a lot of things to improve my knowledge and learn and grow, and in addition to what I've done for Fletcher's, because I can't control what the government is going to do and how we're going to do it. So again, the more you can live in a circle of influence and feeling that you're in control of what you can do, you can influence those things. And where it's outside your influence and you can't, then you accept it and you don't focus on it, because then you just feel smaller. All right, everybody, thank you for joining. Sorry, yeah?
It's Sue Stone again. I think I just want to go back to that point you raised about getting others on board, like, a supervisor or, someone else that you're working with, because I think sometimes it's really important. Your ideas and recommendations and suggestions could be really, really good for, the company or other work members, whatever the case may be. But there might be a clash of personalities with that particular director or boss that you go to. So sometimes it works really well to get someone else on board that has a better relationship with that person, that can put the point across to them in a language that they can understand, when it might not be coming across as being beneficial or trying to help the organisation because of a personality clash type of thing there. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, saying one thing, but that person's taking it there's nothing wrong with how we're doing things, in a negative way, instead of oh, okay, yeah, that's a good idea, because there's a personality clash or something there. So I think it's really important, if you go to others and they might be able to have a different approach with that person that gets the point across better.
Yeah, well, that's what circle of influence is. What you're saying is, you can either live in the view that I can get this changed, or I can get this influenced, I can be heard, and I'm going to figure out how I do that, and it might be involving other people, it might be getting some other champions on board, it might be changing the language a little bit, it might be changing the approach. When we do seek first to understand before trying to be understood, that's a really powerful tool to help do that, and we'll talk about that, several sessions after this. But the whole idea of circle of influence is if you believe it's important, you don't give up, but you figure out, how do I get this to be what I need? And that's the best way to live, is with a positive outlook that you can affect things. You can get pretty much what you want if it's the right thing. And, you know, and not everyone's ideas are the right thing all the time. And sometimes you got to accept, yeah, fair enough, that maybe wasn't the best idea at the time, or maybe other things are I can understand now in a full understanding of everything going on, that that's a good idea, but it's maybe not the right time, and accept that. So, and then when you accept that and you realize that you're still living in a circle of influence, because you realize that, yeah, it's maybe not the best thing right now. That's great. I was heard. I understand their point of view, and things are never black and white. So that's for sure. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for today. I hope you enjoyed it. And we're just going to continue on Covey for a while. If you haven't got the book, I do encourage you to read the book. You should read that summary by David Fleming, who's my stepson, who wrote, when I made him do a homework assignment because he was naughty one day, he wrote that about Covey. But his book's really good, you know, and it's really an interesting read. So I hope you get it and read it. And we'll see you on Wednesday. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Bradley.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Bradley.
Bradley. Thank you.
See you, everybody.
Good job.